Iranian naval frigate, the Dina, was targeted by a US submarine on the 4th of March. It had a complement of about 180 sailors, of whom 87 are confirmed killed, 61 are missing, and about 32 have been rescued by the Sri Lankan Navy. This was targeted off the coast of Sri Lanka, Gali, and it was there because it was returning from being part of the International Fleet Review that India was hosting this year, and its soldiers, paraded through the streets of Visakhapatnam, and it was returning from there. And when you're part of these international fleet reviews or these exercises, ceremonial exercises, you're in something known as peace protocol. And that is that your weapon systems are powered down, or your weapon systems stand down. So your missiles, your torpedoes, your guns are not in a state to fire immediately, or are not ready for that purpose. Secondly, your transponders are on and your communications are open. You're using standard channels of communication, not encrypted channels. With your transponder on, you're broadcasting to the world that I'm an Iranian vessel. I'm not a threat to anyone. And so those things were all complied with. And finally, you're not taking any hostile maneuvering, right? You're not being aggressive or taking an aggressive stance. You're not attacking anyone, and you're certainly, you don't need to take any evasive action, things along those lines. And those all seem to have been complied with by the Dina. Having said that, there are two views under international law whether this was a legal kill or not. And the first is that it was legal. And the reason is that under international humanitarian law, the laws of armed conflict, all military assets can be considered having military potential and legitimate targets. And so it doesn't matter where they are, what they're doing. If it's a soldier, it doesn't matter whether he's cooking or ironing his clothes or sleeping. He has military potential, so he can be targeted. Similarly, a vessel that is returning back to its country that has military potential, that ability to cause harm to the enemy, if it's doing those, then it can be considered a military asset and a legitimate target, really, under international humanitarian law. The only exception to this is if it was damaged so much beyond the point where it had that military potential, so it was hors de combat, or out of the fight, out of the war, or it surrendered. Now, if either of these things happened, then it would not be a legitimate target, and it would be considered a war crime to target it. Now, Dina, however, was a fully functional Iranian vessel. We don't know whether it had the ammunition to actually cause these things, and that's where really the controversy arises. The second issue is are those who argue that it was an illegal kill. First of all, the ship posed no immediate threat to anyone. It was under peace protocol conditions. It may not have had ammunition to even fire at anyone. And it was returning home from a ceremonial parade, not even from combat operations, and it was pretty far away from the actual theater of operations. Now, this is something that certainly is an issue there. Now, would it be considered a war crime? Just off the top of my head, my gut answer, probably not. And the reason is that, a war crime has to be a grave violation of the laws of armed conflict. This often involves, the deliberate targeting of civilians or protected vessels. And the Dina really did not have any specific protection as such. It was still inherently a military vessel, and it had that military potential. So the question is, was it proportionate? Did the US really need to kill, 87 plus, maybe another 60, well over 100 people to achieve whatever military, objective it had? Probably not. They could have just forced it. It was, vulnerable. They could have forced it back to port, or they could have taken it over. Was there any military necessity to it? Was it genuinely a threat, or was it simply an easy target, and that's why they targeted it? Probably that's the reason. Now, we have some precedent for this, right? We have the UK during the Falkland Islands. They sank the Argentinian ship, the Belgrano. This was in 1982, I think. And this was hugely controversial, right? Because the Belgrano at the time was going away from the actual theater of battle, right? It wasn't part of the fight. It wasn't really, in that theater of war. But the issue was that it still had military potential, right? And so was it a legitimate target? Probably, and no one really considered or ruled it a war crime as such. And so really there is that controversy that remains, and so that's something that's going to be looked at. It's not an easy answer, and unfortunately in international law you don't get such clear-cut answers.